Welcome to the Environment Medicine podcast, where we talk about the environment and medicine. We raise awareness about important global issues such as climate change and pollution and how they affect our well-being. Today we're talking about microplastics with our guest speaker, Dana Zhaxlykova. Dana does it all, from advancing science through her microplastics research to educating her online community of over 75,000 followers. She is determined to change our world's attitude towards these tiny, ubiquitous particles. Dana emphasizes practical steps individuals can take to reduce plastic consumption and demand changes in environmental health policy within our governments. For her work, Dana was also featured on the BBC audio program What in the World. Tune in to learn more about Dana. So, if you had to summarize what it is you do and why you do it, what would it be?
I'm doing my microplastics research where I try to analyze this problem and see the extent of the pollution with microplastics. And why I do it, it's actually interesting because at first I didn't know much about microplastics. It's not a topic that you learn even in environmental science fields because it's quite new topic. We only started to research it for the last 15 years maybe. And in terms of science, it's quite new. And before that, I've heard of microplastics, but never realized how big the problem is. So when I started my research, that was only because of the suggestions of my professor. I started to read literature, read a lot of different papers, and I realized that it's literally affecting everyone and everything in our world, but at the same time quite understudied. There are little to no policies or regulations when it comes to microplastics. So I would say that the main reason for me to study microplastics is to understand first. And second is after I gain the understanding, to use this understanding in order to solve the problem, to finally introduce the proper regulations and proper policies.
That's very cool. So could you tell me more about what got you interested in microplastics in the beginning?
As I said, it was just my professor who suggested me this topic. And I wasn't quite interested in the first place. But when I started reading the literature and reading the papers, I understood that first, microplastics is absolutely everywhere. And whenever we try to look for them in different samples, we found them there. Let it be the environment, the water, the air, or very distant, remote places of the world, and even human bodies, everywhere in the human body, in different organs, in the blood, in our brains. So it sparked a big interest in me. Another thing is the lack of regulations, as I said before. So, for example, when I did my experiments, I had my concentration of microplastics in the water and the wastewater samples. And I wanted to understand, is it a big amount or is it a small amount? Is it in acceptable limits? So I was trying to find any, the limits or the regulations in my country, which is Kazakhstan, and I didn't find anything. So I thought maybe there are other countries or other regions in the world who have these policies. And I literally couldn't find anything. So it means that in any country of the world, there is no limit to how many microplastics you can discharge, either be 2 microplastics per day or literally trillions of microplastics per day. It will not be regulated. It's not even monitored anywhere. And another thing is how many plastic objects we surround ourselves with, which is also not regulated, and we are quite extensively using them everywhere, which is affecting us.
Yeah, and so you were mentioning how microplastics are basically everywhere in our surroundings. What would you say are some ways that you would recommend that we could use to protect ourselves from microplastics?
I usually highlight 3 main points when I talk about the tips about reducing your microplastics exposure. And the first one is usually kitchen or food. So ingestion route is the biggest route for microplastic exposure nowadays, and in general. So I would try to limit any plastic packaging or plastic utensils, plastic containers, plastic uh, cutlery, and to cut down wherever it's possible, because this is like the biggest exposure route for microplastics. It's where microplastics are leaching in the biggest amounts. So we talk about like food containers, plastic water bottles, especially those utensils and cutleries that are got heated. Yeah, the second thing is the textiles. So all the things that we touch with our skin. Uh, it's clothes we wear every day. It's the bed sheets that we sleep on like for 8 to 10 hours. Uh, so going from plastic and synthetic fabrics to more natural, which doesn't reach microplastics. And third area is everything that has to do with the bathroom. So it's personal care products, because most of them, they contain microplastics as an ingredient. Um, so we're talking about shampoos, deodorants, creams, cleansers, uh, what else? Yeah, almost everything. Toothpaste, tooth powder. So many of these things, they usually have microplastics as an ingredient. Yeah, toothpaste as well, but it's quite hard to find toothpaste without plastic.
Yeah. Yeah, would you say you had to sacrifice a lot of the things that you really liked to kind of accommodate for your awareness of microplastics?
Wouldn't, wouldn't call them limits. Of course, maybe for some people it feels like a limit or something, but for me, I enjoy it, and I actually feel freer from like the consumption, from this constant urge and need to buy different things, to buy as much skincare as I possibly can, or like to buy a lot of clothes. It's actually a freeing experience for me, because now I can focus more on what I actually like than spending my money and time on like buying and consuming the things that you actually don't need in your life.
That's really good. Um, so for you, you had it in a more positive attitude is what I'm seeing. Would you think that this change would be easy for everybody to make?
Mm, um, hmm. I wouldn't say for everyone for sure, because it really depends
Yeah.
on where you are, what is available for you, and if you have the knowledge about this, if you have an easy access to this knowledge, um, to know about like microplastics or what are the brands that are using microplastics or plastic. And plastic is a very tricky material, I would say, because you wouldn't think that like plastic bags, plastic containers, plastic clothes, and plastic in your skincare is like it's plastic. Like it's so versatile. It can have many different forms. It's really hard to, differentiate between different things, but still all of them are plastic. So
Mhm.
yeah, it comes down to education, which is not easily accessible,
Yeah.
and not even like in developed countries, people are still confused with the plastic term and microplastic term. Uh, yeah, and another thing is also the availability of the resources, the availability of the options in the market. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I see. Yeah. And on the internet and in my own community, like among high schoolers, I often see like a lot of people have an indifference to microplastics because as you're saying, they're basically everywhere. And like plastic is so versatile, you can find it in any object. And so their argument is that since microplastics are everywhere and like we don't have some crazy epidemic or pandemic that's going around, then there's likely no real reason to be concerned. What do you think about this?
um, hmm. I mean, the thing that we're not witnessing these things, like it's really hard to tell right now what are the real consequences of microplastics, of course, especially since plastic wasn't around for a long time. It's only been around for less than 80 years,
Yeah.
and we only realized about the problem of microplastics and other plastics also very, very recently. Uh, so we still don't have like the long-term studies about microplastics. Uh, we still don't know like the full picture of microplastics, and also the concentration of it is increasing from year to year. For example, in the recent study, when they studied the samples of brain, they studied the samples from 2016 to 2024, and they saw the amount of microplastics was exponentially increasing, which means it's going to increase by a huge amount from year to year. So maybe we don't see the effects now, but we could easily see them in, like, in 10, 20, or maybe 30 years. And there's still a lot of research that are popping out where they study these health effects. And yeah, it's hard to say right now that it's not affecting
Yeah.
people at all. So I would say it's still important to reduce your exposure to microplastics as well as the consumption of plastic for the health reasons and for the environmental reasons as well. Because even if it's not going to affect your health in any way, it's going to affect the environment, and the environment is going to affect you, which the cycle continues. Even if it doesn't affect your health, it will affect you in some way because it affects the environment.
Yeah, for sure. And I think a really good point that you made was that people who are these critics do need to have access to more education regarding microplastics. And you seem to be very active on that end, especially through your social media platforms. Can you tell me a little bit more about what got you into like social media activism and community engagement and like just sharing scientific research in general?
Yeah, actually, from my childhood, I really enjoyed making videos, editing, shooting, everything. So I really liked it as my hobby, and I did it for a long time. But when I started my master's in environmental contamination here in Europe, I was thinking, how can I, merge these two passions I have for the content creation and video shooting with the environmental science and my microplastics research. So I was just looking for the inspiration for other people who are doing that. And I found a lot of great sustainability experts or, climate communicators, climate change communicators on Instagram. And it really inspired me to create my platform and use my skills for video creation to raise awareness about microplastics, because I realized there are not a lot of resources on that on social media, as well as not, a lot of scientists. Like, I didn't find any real microplastics researcher or scientist that would create the educational videos or reels and stuff like this. So I decided to try it out. And at first I didn't see a lot of interest, but after some time, in like 2-3 months after publishing a lot of videos, I finally saw an interest from people. I saw that people are really invested in the problem. People really care about the microplastics problem when they realize what it is and how it affects their life or the environment. And yeah, I think this is my experience in a nutshell.
Yeah, that sounds really nice. Um, and going along with the whole theme of community engagement, what role do you think like common people, community members, and youth especially, what role do you think we have in this battle against microplastics?
There are different ways, I think, to engage with this problem and to sort of solve this. First, the most important one is advocating for the changes and for the policies, for the regulations. It's very important to ask and demand changes from our government, because they have the biggest impact and the biggest source of power that can do changes. And another thing is educating yourself and other people, because without education, of course, you cannot understand the problem itself and what kind of solutions you need and what kind of policies and regulations you need that will not only solve the problem but make the life of other people better. Yeah. And third thing is, of course, trying to do some action by yourself, whether it's voting with your dollar, meaning that you're not actively supporting the organizations or companies or brands, that are creating, unnecessary plastic packaging and unnecessary plastic waste. Or just voting for green parties and representatives that have environment in their minds when they do the plans. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. I also heard that you were invited to BBC. Congratulations, by the way. That's an amazing achievement. How do you feel?
I was actually so shocked. I didn't believe at first, and I thought it's like some sort of elaborate scam strategy. I didn't know because they reached out to me by email and they were asking for interview literally for the next day. But I checked everything. I checked the email, and when I realized it's not a scam, I was so excited for it. First, because it means that the microplastics is interesting for people, and I will raise the awareness about this problem even further. But
Yeah.
another thing, it's a first personal one. I was very excited to be on BBC. It's a huge achievement for me, of course, and I'm very grateful to have this opportunity to speak about such an important topic on such a big news channel, such as BBC.
Yeah, it's very inspiring for me, and I'm sure many young people, especially females, are
Yeah.
very, very inspired looking at your journey.
Thank you so much.
Of course, of course. And so just to wrap up here, what would be your message for our youth audience here at Invading Medicine?
I would say it's very important to educate yourself. Education is very important in any field that you're gonna be or you're gonna find you in. And with proper education and with the ability to self-study, you can literally be proficient in any topic. For me, education and science, of course, it's part of my career, but I'm actually very interested in that. Even apart from my career, I like to read about different environmental topics, not only the microplastic one. I think it's a very good advice, a general one, but I would say it's a good advice to always stay updated to the topics, and without changes, without education, without learning your skills, they become stale. So educate yourself in any topic.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming. It was really amazing having you on today. And thank you for the audience who will be watching this soon as well.
Thank you so much for having me. I would be very excited to to share this podcast with my audience as well.
That's a wrap on today's deep dive into microplastics and their impact on our world. A huge thank you to Dana Zhaxlykova for sharing her invaluable insights. Knowledge like this is the key to driving change. If this conversation resonated with you, don't stop here. Share this episode, start discussions, and most importantly, look for ways to reduce microplastic exposure in your own life. Every small action counts. For more episodes tackling the pressing environmental health issues of our time, subscribe to the Invading Medicine podcast and follow us on Instagram for updates, advocacy opportunities, and solutions. Together, we can turn knowledge into action. Until next time, keep asking questions, keep pushing for change, and take care of yourselves and the planet. See you soon.